Yeah, I'm on that God mode. Those were the prophetic words of Aleksib, not quite said like that, when he for some reason joined the Vakars for the song aptly titled God Mode. One wonders if he might have been on stage for the live performance in Copenhagen were he not in the grand final. Probably wouldn't have been the worst singer on stage either. Aleksib has been a totemic figure for lovers and haters alike since his controversial departure from ENT. His clear ability to make a team good and occasionally great made him someone that was worth supporting, but his lack of real bona fide trophies made him an easy target for critique in many ways. Not anymore though. Aleksib started out in the Finnish scene where he quickly rose to prominence on the famous ENT. ENT had always been sort of a meme before Aleksib. It was like the team that Finnish people supported before they grew out of any sense of patriotism, like Endpoint for English people or Tai Lu for Chinese people. There was, of course, a song about them, but even that wasn't quite as ubiquitous now as it was then. It certainly wouldn't have been in the game had it not been for the song of IEM Katowice in 2019. Even before then, Aleksib was making waves. After an impressive spell with Havu, Aleksib was recalled back to ENT and quickly helped them qualify to big events. A top 8 showing at Cologne in 2018 might have felt like a flash in the pan, but Aleksib's men were building something. Impressive showings at the DreamHack Open in Montreal, a win in Jönköping, and a top 8 at Epicenter in 2018 showed that ENT were for real this time. That all culminated in a ridiculously impressive 2019, where the Finns famously found themselves just one series away from winning the major. They did, of course, come up against arguably the best team of all time and get soundly beaten, but who cares? They even beat Astralis in Madrid to win Blast Pro Series and finish second in Chicago. But it wasn't long after that he was removed in sort of suspicious circumstances. Not suspicious in the sense he'd done anything wrong, more in that he kind of didn't do anything wrong. There seemed to be no rhyme or reason beyond the sort of vague allusion to the vibes being wrong from Alu, which, I mean, you're Finnish. Of course you weren't enjoying yourself. From there, Aleksib's next project was the high-hoping, money-splashing, big-name-hunting OG, which is a far cry from what they are now, at least the last two. OG have become far more frugal, but they obviously still aim high. In retrospect, this team might not have been the super team it was originally billed as. NBK's powers were wavering, while Issa and Valde were solid but unspectacular on this team. It was actually Mantu who turned out to be the breakout star, but since leaving Aleksib's warm embrace, he hasn't quite reached the same heights, at least yet. This wasn't a disastrous period of Aleksib's career, but it wasn't a massive bright spot either. OG were up and down, but never picked up a marquee win despite a couple of finals. It was in some ways an overachievement to even make those finals, but at the time it felt like maybe they could have won one of them. Things as well might have been different had it not been COVID times. After things started to go downhill on OG, Aleksib got a move that it felt like could define his career. Welcome to G2 Aleksib. This was a move that promised so much. We'd seen what Aleksib could do with, and let's be real here, an okay set of talent with little in the way of brilliance. Sure, that ENT team was a good team, but it wasn't Nico, Hunter, Monacy, Jax. That's not even a slight on ENT. Nobody is Nico, Hunter, Monacy, Jax. We'd seen what Aleksib could do with ENT, so the mind gets excited when it thinks about what he could achieve with superstar talent. The sky really was the limit, and though they came up in the spot looking extra fly, they just didn't quite touch the sky. I'm really sorry for that joke. Expectations, if they weren't high enough already, were sent into the stratosphere when G2 finished second in Katowice. Not just because of how good the result was or how Aleksib was doing, but because Monacy was immediately god tier on stage. However, the one big criticism a lot of people had of Aleksib was that he was a nearly man, a Michael Ballack, a Harry Kane, a Steven Gerrard. Yes, you're good. There's clearly something that doesn't quite click in the big moments. And when G2 choked a massive lead on Mat 1 of the final, including that ace from Rops, those criticisms bubbled to the surface. That felt like a telling moment in the G2 arc of Aleksib's story, and they never seemed to recover. There were flashes of brilliance, but they were as fleeting as they were dazzling. After a lackluster showing at Cologne, Aleksib's stock was as low as it had been for a while. But I mean, even then, they weren't that low. While NIP weren't quite as hard-hitting as G2 in terms of star power, they weren't doing too badly, and they extended an olive branch to Aleksib as he looked to recover, and as they looked for a short-term replacement for Hampus. This period, unlike the OG one, was largely disastrous. There were, as ever, some good results, but this team meandered into mediocrity as the much-hyped trio of riflers failed to get off the ground, and even the return of Hamfus did little to invigorate the team. It's easy to point the finger at Aleksib here, but the rest of the team weren't really doing enough either. Aleksib will probably admit himself he wasn't at his best on his team, but look, I'm contractually obliged to not be too mean to teams. And my mother also always told me if I don't have anything nice to say, then to say nothing. So that NIP team was nothing. What it was though was a learning experience. Aleksib rocked up on Na'Vi, and honestly few were sure exactly what to expect. This was a weirdly constructed team, but in retrospect it actually made perfect sense. Aleksib is a guy who can build players up inside of his own system and turn good players into very good ones and very good ones into great ones. Perhaps on G2 we saw that with elite talent he's kind of not that good, but when he gets to build his own stars, he's dynamite. No player has embodied that more than JL, the floppy-haired, unassuming, doe-eyed superstar, who went from a breakout star on Apex with some struggles in the bigger games, into a major MVP, big game, massive cock, giga chad, clinical cold assassin. He does still look a bit like your younger sister's first boyfriend, who your parents didn't really like though. Aleksib got his hands on JL and turned him into a player who now has more majors than the Nico Hunter Modesty core that Aleksib had before. And deservedly too. Early signs on this team were good, of course, but even the most diehard Na'Vi fan probably didn't think this was going to happen. Na'Vi smacked everyone in Copenhagen and were more than deserved winners. In retrospect, perhaps it was more foreseeable than we thought. Aleksib had been in a major final before. Bit won his first major without dropping a map. Imma was the best rifler in Paris in his second ever major, and JL stood out in France as well. This was a team of major superstars. This was like a not market Bad News Eagles or a team full of world edits and flamies and Juan Flatros. Aleksib had a reputation as a great IGL who just kept falling short of greatness. But in Na'Vi, he found a team willing to run through brick walls for him. He found a team who threw themselves totally into the system because they were young and not tenured enough to have a big ego yet. Aleksib forged his own path and created greatness against all odds. Welcome to the history books, Aleksib. You fucking earned it.